Now the fun begins. I'm going to show you how I apply all the different gorgeousnesses and sparkles that you can add onto Decaville. I'm sure you will have many more ideas than I do, but I'll show you what I use. And then you can go through your stash and see what sticks. So here we go with some of the media that I use to iron onto Decaville. So we have our ironing surface and we have our Decaville, and it's shiny side up. It's glue on this shiny side. You can see which side the glue is on. I've painted this and it's dry. It's very important that your Decaville is dry, same as Bonderweb when you paint it and you work with it. You need to make sure that it's bone dry before you start to work with the glue. So just to show you the eyelash fabric that I particularly love working with, you can move it around a bit. You can put it into circles and spirals. I would avoid wiggly worms if you could, but that's just a style point from me. Just move my scissors out of the way because they're always lurking. And then I've got an iron off steam on hot. And I'm making sure that I've got enough baking parchment to cover the whole surface of the Decaville, because you don't want any glue exposed, just in case you hit it with your iron. And then you can peel off, and that's all stuck on. So it's great fun, isn't it? You can also use things like lace, as I showed you in the materials list. I'm not going to do any kind of beautiful design work. This is literally just a process to show you what will stick. So this is a medium heavyweight cotton lace that's been space dyed. You could use nylon lace, all kinds of stuff. So again, I'm doing this all in real time, so you get the idea. So that's all stuck on. It's not going anywhere. Then we can start to look at papers. You can tear paper, you can cut paper, you can use photographs, you can use magazine articles and photographs. There are so many beautiful photographs in magazines. I like to tear my papers because I like the rough edge, and I'll just pop that down next to that. If you like working with papers, then have a look at the a new starting point workshop, because that is all about recycling paper. As I said before, these workshops all tend to join up. So the processes that you learn on a new starting point can all be applied to making boxes and book covers. Here's some polyester organza that I've cut up. Any shear will work. And then I'm just going to roll it into a sausage and then snip it into little strips with some sharpish scissors. And you end up with some really pretty little lines, because you don't necessarily want a whole piece of organza on there, because once you've ironed the organza on there, the glue is obviously covered and not sticky anymore. Although if you wanted to, you could cover it with organza. It's glue, it's up to you. So I'll just pop that away. And then you see this kind of thing is quite pretty, and it can be quite organic. If you use the right colors, it can look like waves in the sea or stormy clouds, or you could do sunsets. It's all stuck to my arm now. It's very sticky organza, but it is lovely. I'm trying to keep these all going in the same direction. Right, I'm just going to get rid of the rest of this. It's like an octopus now on the table. So I'll just iron that in place. When you're working with lots of different media and you're experimenting, don't just put everything on all at once. I know it's tempting because you want to just put it all on. It's really exciting and you want to see what sticks. But just do a bit at a time, just so that you can concentrate on each piece that you're layering, particularly if you're new to this. This is a piece of scrim that's been space dyed. I teach a lot of dyeing workshops, so I've got lots of space dyed fabrics, and they stick really nicely to the Decaville. So again, you can see that I'm still covering this up here, as well as this side, because you just don't want the iron hitting the glue, because it's annoying and you'll have a dirty iron. So that's all stuck. And then if you've already done a new starting point on the video library, you may well have some little elements that might stick onto the Decaville. These are quite thin, so they should stick. I wouldn't rely on the glue on the Decaville. I would stitch around these afterwards, but we'll just iron these down so you can see. As long as something's flat and dry, it's the same as working with Bondaweb. It will stick. Dried flowers, that kind of thing, not beads or wire. But you can always stitch those on. There is stitch. I think you don't have to glue everything. So those are all ironed on, they're not going anywhere. And then I can start playing with my gilding flake because I love it. So always keep the lid on your gilding flake. Gilding flake is very, very thin metal. Got big bits, you might need to break them up. Do not sneeze, do not cough, do not exhale. I'm just going to put these down so you can see what happens. Put the lid back on, Kin. And then when you put the baking parchment down, do it very, very carefully. You do not want to create a draft because the gilding flake will go absolutely everywhere and it looks lovely in a drift. I've just got some that's about to go onto the little fishy there. I don't want it on there, so I'm going to move him. Okay, so we'll just iron that in place. So as I say, I'm doing this in real time so you can see how long it takes. It takes a couple of seconds because you need to activate the glue, which is why you have a hot iron and you use baking parchment at all times. So yeah, you need to activate the glue. So this glue will always be active to an iron or to a heat source. So when you're making your boxes or book covers or whatever it is you're doing, make sure that you seal them with varnish or something. I'll tell you about it at the end, so that the glue is covered and then you can't heat it with an iron or a heat gun again. I'll just show you the mica flakes because I particularly like these because they're not too shiny. Now, it's not something you would expect to hear me say, really, because I do like a little bit of glitter and a bit of sparkle. It's going to move those out because obviously if they're sitting on top of each other, they're not going to stick to the Decaville. So these, like the gilding flake, look really gorgeous in drifts, not straight lines and not just random all over the place. But if you can get them into drifts, then they can look quite pretty. And again, just iron that off. You don't have to press. It's the heat that does the work. And as I say, you can use a craft iron, but I just find them a bit small. As long as it's hot, then you can use it. So that's all stuck on there. Got a little bit of a stray piece there, so you do have to watch that. And then the last thing I'm going to show you, although there are many, many more things you can iron on, including glitter, all kinds of stuff. I'm just going to show you how to use transfer foil. When I'm working on book covers and boxes and things like that, I use the side of the iron to get stripes. I don't flat iron the Decaville with the foil. I don't want to cover the surface with foil. So I'm just going to pop the transfer foil colour side up. Okay, it's not the shiny side, it's colour side up. This is the oil and water one, which I think you can just about see in the lights. I always use baking parchment on the top. I know some tutors don't, but there's just no point risking melting your transfer foil. I know it's not really expensive, but you just don't want to waste it. So I put the iron right angles to the table, and then I just run it along the transfer foil. And wherever the iron hits the glue, the foil will stick. So I'm just going to do a few lines there. And then you take off the baking parchment, and then you take off the transfer foil. Wherever I've hit the glue with the iron, the transfer foil has stuck. So there's quite a few things that you can start playing with. If you haven't worked with Decaville before, then I would recommend that you do a test. It doesn't have to be this big. Obviously, I'm a bit of a thug because I like big pieces. And I might use this as a sample at the show that's coming up. But just do a test. As I say, you don't have to use a huge piece of Decaville because it's not the cheapest stuff in the world, but it is very good. So you don't need to do a huge piece to find out what will stick. When you flat foil the Decaville, basically you can have a really lovely mirrored surface, basically. You won't get a total coverage because there's a web of glue. So it's a bit like Bondweb on the Decaville. So you're not going to get a sheer coverage, but you get enough to give you a really nice mirror effect. And then again, of course, you can print onto it and then machine stitch around it or hand stitch, because obviously the foil is quite lively, and if you want some definition, you will need to use some kind of stitch to bring it out. And to flat foil, you have your Decaville shiny side or sticky side up. You have your transfer foil. Now, obviously, I have some voided areas here because I've been using this for slashes. So see what happens. Baking parchment, as always. And then your iron. That should be long enough. So take the baking paper off and then just give it a minute to cool down. When you're flat foiling, it's a good idea to turn your iron down. Then you won't get these ripples because the foil is underneath a plastic film. And if you want a really smooth surface, then you just need to turn your iron down to wool. It will still stick. The glue will still be activated at that temperature, and then you won't get this effect, which I have done on purpose. So you can see. So in the time that I've spoken to you about it, it's time to peel off. So just peel off the plastic cover and you're left with a foil surface. You can see that that's all stuck down. So if you have sheets of transfer foil with voided shapes that aren't too big, certainly lines are good, they work very well, then you can just iron off the whole of your foil and then you'll get the voided shapes, you'll get the negative spaces. But I would be very careful about ironing large areas of voided shapes onto, let's do that on the black, large areas of voided shapes onto anything gluey, because what will happen is the plastic will stick to the Decaville or the Bondweb and it will rip the whole lot off. So you do need to have a reasonable amount of foil left on the transfer foil. I hope that makes sense.